Shaquille O'Neal, the self-proclaimed man of steel, Shaq Diesel, the big Aristotle, the alleged most dominant player in NBA history.
Shaq, he's the greatest of the universe.
A man so utterly dominant that nearly 20 years after completing just the third three-peat in the post-merger modern era, he remains the source of one of the most delusional and pathetic narratives in all of basketball history, that he carried Kobe Bryant. Shaq was drafted by the Orlando Magic in the 1992 draft with the first overall pick.
The Orlando Magic selects Shaquille O'Neal.
And by just his second year in the league, at the age of 21, O'Neal would ascend into elite status, making All-NBA third team while averaging 29 points and 13 rebounds per game. The individual dominance, however, would not translate to playoff success, as O'Neal would be swept in the first round of the playoffs that year by the Indiana Pacers. The next season, the Orlando Magic would win 57 games behind O'Neal and claim the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs, getting all the way into the NBA Finals, where Shaq would win his first NBA championship. Well, no, he didn't. Shaq would run up against the Hakeem Olajuwon-led Houston Rockets, and the Dream would sweep O'Neal in the finals, largely abusing him in the post throughout the series.
Tell me how my ass tastes.
Orlando would win 60 games the next season and make it all the way back to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would get steamrolled again in a 4-game sweep, this time by the 72-win Chicago Bulls, swept in consecutive years despite the contributions of his elite second-fiddle teammate Penny Hardaway, who was named first-team All-NBA in both of those seasons. And it would be amid mounting dissension with the Magic's front office over his pending contract extension that O'Neal would leave Orlando that summer in one of the most seismic free agent signings in NBA history. O'Neal took his talents to Tinseltown and started the most recent Hollywood dynasty. Oh, and also that summer, in much less relevant news, the Charlotte Hornets drafted some skinny kid out of Lower Merion High School with the 13th pick in the NBA draft.
With the 13th pick in the 1996 NBA draft, the Charlotte Hornets select Kobe Bryant.
Shaq would hit the ground running in LA in his first season with the Lakers on that massive contract he signed in the summer, as they would win 56 games that year, and along with an all-star caliber backcourt of Eddie Jones and Nick Van Exel, Shaquille O'Neal would win the NBA championship. Well, no, he didn't. The Lakers lost in the second round of the playoffs to the Utah Jazz in 5 games. But the next year would be the Lakers' year for Shaq to get swept again in the playoffs. Again this time losing to the Utah Jazz. But in his third year with the Lakers and his 7th season in the NBA overall, O'Neal was finally ready to get swept again in the playoffs, this time in the second round at the hands of the San Antonio Spurs, as 22-year-old Tim Duncan largely dominated that series en route to winning his first NBA championship.
Tell me how my ass tastes.
But in year 4 with the Lakers, the tide was finally ready to turn in Shaq's favor, as the skinny kid the Hornets drafted 3 years earlier was finally ready to get carried by Shaq. Kobe Bryant that season would not only take the leap to becoming a perennial all-star caliber player, but he made All-NBA second team this year and All-NBA first team defense. And coincidentally, finally, Shaq found the formula to stop getting swept out of the playoffs every single year. The Lakers would go on to win the NBA championship that season, for real this time, and it would be their first of 3 consecutive titles, a three-peat. One of the rarer feats in the history of the sport, as it has only been accomplished 3 times since the ABA and NBA merged in August of 1976, creating the modern era of the NBA as we know it. And since that year, in almost 50 seasons, only the Jordan Bulls twice and the Shaq and Kobe Lakers once have managed to accomplish it. And it has now, all of a sudden, been more than 20 years since Shaq and Kobe did it. Over that span of time, we have seen various alleged all-time great players amass multiple different super teams, yet no one has been able to duplicate it. And all it took was Shaquille O'Neal, who clearly could have won those championships with anyone else. From the Lakers' first championship in that 1999-2000 season, Kobe and Shaq would play 5 more seasons together, making it to 4 NBA Final Series and winning 3 of them. In those 5 years, during the regular season, Shaq averaged 27 points per game, 12 rebounds, and 3 assists. Over that same span of time, Bryant averaged 26 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. Now these numbers may look startlingly similar, but don't be fooled. Shaq definitely carried Kobe in the playoffs to those 3 rings. During those 5 years in the finals runs, Shaq averaged 27 points per game, 14 rebounds, and 3 assists, while Kobe would average 26 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. Over that 5-year span, Bryant would be named All-NBA first or second team in all 5 years, and he would be named All-NBA defensive first or second team all 5 years. Additionally, Bryant would lead the Lakers in fourth quarter scoring during 4 of those 5 playoff runs and in 2 of their 3 rings together. Bryant wouldn't just lead the Lakers in fourth quarter scoring, he led the entire league in playoff scoring during the fourth quarter. Alas, as with life and in sports, all good things must eventually come to an end. And in the summer of 2004, Kobe Bryant decided he was tired of being carried by Shaquille O'Neal. And after 8 seasons, 4 finals appearances, and 3 titles together, the Shaq and Kobe era would come to an end. Shaq would famously go on to win the NBA championship 2 years later, while carrying another young ascending guard in Dwayne Wade, as Wade would play one of the best final series this century, while being named Finals MVP. Kobe, meanwhile, would go on to produce arguably the greatest scoring season ever and lead the league in scoring 2 of his first 3 years without Shaq before returning to the NBA Finals himself, but unfortunately learning that anything is possible.
Anything's possible!
And getting beaten in 6 games by the Boston Celtics. After the series, reveling in Bryant's failure to capture his 4th ring, Shaq would famously ask Kobe how a certain part of his body tasted.
Last week, Kobe couldn't do without me. Tell me how my ass tastes.
And amid all of the criticism that summer and doubting he had a viable roster capable of overcoming the talent of the Boston Celtics, Kobe would beg some other superstar to help him steal some cheap rings. No, wait, that was some other guy a few seasons later. Kobe would stick it out in LA, ultimately getting the last laugh against Shaq and all of his other critics, as he would take his 1 All-Star and win back-to-back championships, doing it through an absolutely historically stacked Western Conference. Meanwhile, Shaq went on to play with a lot of other great players. From D-Wade, he would move on to MVP Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns, then prime MVP LeBron in Cleveland, before ending his career with the Celtics Big Three. Despite all of the great teams and all of the great players O'Neal played with aside from Kobe, he managed to win exactly 1 total ring without Bryant. In fact, what a better source than Shaquille O'Neal himself to let you know what an overrated career Kobe had.
I don't compare anybody to Mike, but if I had to answer the question, Kobe is the closest thing to Mike. And is there somebody that's close to Kobe? No.
Looking back on it all, though certainly not the most accomplished, Shaq and Kobe constituted arguably the greatest duo in NBA history. Their crowning achievement was the 2001 season, the middle of 3 straight titles, and what was arguably the greatest team in NBA history, as they became just one of 4 teams ever to play 4 opponents in the playoffs that each won a minimum of 50 games, making it one of the most challenging championships of all time. The Lakers didn't just beat this field of teams, they eviscerated them, going 15-1 in the postseason. During that run, Kobe averaged 29 points per game, which constituted 28.5% of the Lakers scoring per game during the playoffs. For some perspective, during the Cavaliers' 2016 playoff run, when the Cavs beat the Warriors in the finals, LeBron James scored 26 points per game, which was good for only 25% of his team's scoring. Kobe would also add 7 rebounds and 6 assists per game, while leading the postseason that year in win shares and fourth quarter scoring. Imagine a world where many think one of these playoff runs was the greatest ever.
That one right there made me the greatest player of all time.
And in the other, a player barely contributed. When you figure that one out, perhaps you can help sort out global warming and solve the hunger crisis. In the meantime, perhaps we can finally, once and for all, debunk the worst myth in NBA history.